One of the things we know about Shawnee County is that we have food deserts here, and so we have residents who do not have access to grocery stores where they can get fresh fruit and healthy food options. So we wanted to really utilize the gas station, which is where they would go to get quick food for dinner, things like that. And so we wanted to make sure they had an option when they went into the station to be able to feed their family a healthy option.
Most Americans consume way too much sodium in their diet, and the recommendation is much lower than what most Americans consume. And we find out that 77% of our sodium intake is not from the salt shaker, but from the food items that we eat. Hypertension or high blood pressure is one of those chronic diseases that is prevalent among Americans, and one of those reasons is because of their higher salt intake. Higher salt intake can lead to other chronic diseases and complications as well, perhaps renal disease long term if high blood pressure is not well managed.
One of the first things we did when we began the process with these convenience stores was to do a mystery shop. It was completely informal, but we went to about 20 different convenience stores and we just checked them out. We looked at them, we observed them, and we looked around and we saw what kind of posters do they have on the windows, what kinds of items are they promoting on a regular basis. We also went up and we asked the front desk, what are your primary sell pieces? And we found out that there was a strong correlation between what they promoted on those posters and then what was their primary sell pieces.
When we started working with the gas stations here in Shawnee County, one of the things that we really wanted to do was meet with the managers and the owners of the gas stations and kind of get a feel for what kind of products they're currently serving, what they see with their customers. Do they tend to buy fresh fruits? Do they look to see if they're buying something healthy?
They were promoting things like their rotisserie, which contained all the hot dogs, and that was one of their primary sell pieces as well. They also sold a lot of cigarettes, they sold a lot of pop, and they sold a lot of energy drinks. It was just good information to have. It was a nice correlation for us as we went into how are we going to create these environmental supports to promote healthy options in the convenience stores.
We've set up appointments to go in and meet with each of those gas station owners and managers to really understand where they're coming from. And then from that information, we were better able to gauge where we needed to go with our project with the gas stations.
I came into this position working with Misty and the Shawnee County Health Agency with the Spot the Salt in October. It was still kind of getting its feet on the ground with us.
The parameters we use for selecting the healthier food choices in the convenience stores were, number one, the calories 250 calories or less. The second parameter was the sodium had to be 230 milligrams or less. The third thing was the fat content needed to be 35% of total calories or less. The fourth parameter was sugar is not the first ingredient on the list. And the fifth parameter was the fact that they already had these items in their store or could easily purchase them for the customers. It was in working with the managers that we would discover what would be the best options. I would look at all the different snack items, compare their calories, the sodium, the percent fat, look at other nutritional facts with regard to protein and sugar, and see which items would be the best fit for this project.
From there, we were able to get 2 locally owned stations on board with us, and we were then able to also get 2 corporate stations on board. And so that amounted to a total of 13 gas stations here in Shawnee County taking part in the sodium project.
With Hy-Vee being a company that's wanting to promote health and better eating choices, it was something that we definitely hopped on board with.
After selecting the parameters for the food items, the next step was to walk into the convenience stores and see what do they have and what can be easily utilized for the healthy snack food items.
We didn't want them to have to go and get new items into their inventory. We wanted them to be able to utilize what they already had in stock, and that was very important. The only requirement was if they did not already offer fresh fruit, they needed to add that to their inventory. Other than that, we used everything that they were already selling.
Each of the convenience stores had different products available, and so we had to take a look and see which of those would be the best fit. And I did much comparison with that and working with the managers to see what they could get into their store.
So the dietitian went in and really looked at snack items. We weren't concerned about their delis or things like that. We were really looking at those easy to grab items that people stopping at for a quick drink and snack would be looking at.
We started with kind of calling it out a little bit so people kind of understood what was going on.
We ordered some very small half-inch diameter stickers that had our logo on them from the media campaign, and those stickers are associated with the price tag of the items that are healthy options. There's also signage right above the granola bar rack or where these items are saying, you know, spot this logo and know that you've made a healthy choice.
We've put a section with all of the health foods with low sodium, better nutrition options. It's something fairly new for Shawnee County as well.
From there, we really wanted them to have a point of sale rack at the front of the store. So as people were walking up to the register and, you know, you always have candy and things up there, we wanted it to be very prominent in the store. So they had that opportunity to see that, oh, you know what, if I just switch this candy bar out for this granola bar, I'm making a healthier choice.
The healthy food options, low sodium stuff, it's just, it was a no-brainer that we needed to make room for it. You don't see those kind of choices in a fast food type setting. People are in here to get in and get out, so giving them better options, I think, is something that needs to be done.
Each store that jumped on board with this project signed a contract with us, a very loose contract, but basically laying out what we expected from them and what they could expect from us in return. And so we asked them to have the display rack prominent in their store. We asked them to keep it stocked only with the items that were identified by the dietitian.
I created my own database, so then when I spotted a food item in one store, whether it's local or national chain, that I already had that information, I would just pull that up. So the initial start was tedious as far as finding the nutrition information and compiling that information. But throughout the process, when I had that database, it was fairly simple to compile that. And I did give each convenience store manager the compiled list for their particular store for the food items that they were going to stock.
We also asked them to provide us the sales data on those items that were identified. And so we wanted it month by month throughout the project, but we also wanted to go back a year. And so we wanted to be able to compare a year prior into the current year.
The numbers that I've pulled, we've definitely done a lot of extra sales with just those items. They're not items that people come looking for, but they see them and they pick them up.
We also provided technical assistance for them. So if they ran into issues, had concerns, we would go out and help them work through them. We did monthly spot checks with each store, and so we'd just stop in, look at their rack, make sure their signage still looked good. If they needed replacement signage, we would do that.
Very early on, I would notice that the fruit bowls or fruit baskets or fruit areas where we displayed that was actually empty much of the time. The other things where people did stop and take a note and take a look and see what was a healthier choice and compare and actually pick up a healthier choice item.
Really getting feedback from the workers and the managers as well, and talking to the clerks and saying, you know, have you been seeing people come up and ask about this? Are you seeing more traffic to that area? And trying to get an idea for day-to-day operations within the store and how our racks and signage were impacting those.
There are people, this summer I've noticed more people have came in and said, oh, my kid's playing in a tournament, or my kid's gonna be out in the heat, and that's the direction I send them. You know, the low sodium keeps them from being dehydrated, fill them with protein so they're full and not feeling low on anything. So it's coming around. I think people start to look for it more.
In terms of the local stores, they could just go get their fresh produce pretty quickly. I think in terms of setting up the display, some of those were a little bit easier. We had to figure out where to put the display.
Hy-Vee is big on giving customers their space and not clogging them up and forcing them to have something in their way or move around, so that way they are able to shop. So as a company, it's easier for us to make space for things like this in our sets. We're not a company that's set in our ways and this is how it looks, this is how it's going to be. If we see something that's going to be better for a customer, we're going to do it for them.
Once the stores provided their sales data to us as an incentive for them to do that, we then offered them in exchange free advertisement on local radio. And so we worked with our media consultant and were able to put together some pretty short radio ads that ran fairly frequently, just saying, hey, stop into such and such gas station where you can find a healthy option, and give them free advertising in exchange for giving us the sales data.
And I think Hy-Vee's done a great job with promoting it and helping it get its feet off the ground and get a running start at it.
Throughout this project, there have been multiple lessons learned. One of the things right off the beginning was we provided the racks for the gas stations to house the healthy options, and we went out and purchased them prior to really having them on board with doing the project. And what we learned was we purchased cardboard 3-shelf racks that could have our signage on them, that they could have right there in the front of the store. And a couple of the issues that we encountered with those were, one, they were cardboard, so when they would mop the floors and things like that, the bottoms of the rack were getting torn up. And so they actually ended up going out and using their own racks and not even using the ones that we purchased.
Just with the gas station, we have to be looking out for the customers, so we have to be able to see and make sure that they're not doing anything that's going to affect the safety of our other customers as well as us. So those big signs that were with that display were just too large, so we cut it down and made it work, but it's just a lot of those little things that you don't think of.
While it was important to us to make sure it was prominent, it's important to the store because it can't block the view of the gas pumps and things like that they need to be able to see outside. And so we've had to work individually with each location to really make sure we get it in a good spot for them and for us throughout the project.
One of the obstacles that we had was in then formulating the different food items, the healthy snack choices that we had chosen, was the fact that some of these were placed next to very high sodium, high calorie food items. And what the managers or the employees thought were healthy food items, when I did the analysis and the comparison, was not necessarily true. So you as a dietitian need to be the expert in directing them and being very specific and clear on what the healthier choices are and trying to keep them apart.
Collecting the data tended to be a challenge with the local stores. One of the stores that we're working with didn't have prior sales data. They were not tracking their sales at all. And so we still wanted to get them on board. We just don't have the year prior to be able to compare. So their data isn't necessarily overly helpful at this point, but we still wanted them to be a part of the process.
The smaller chains perhaps could sometimes get some food items a little bit sooner than the bigger chains, but in the end of all of this, we found out that the bigger chains did have more data available. So in working with the managers, you need to set your goals and your sites and make your comments clear with regard to what the outcome is that you're looking for.
We did find that getting on board with the local gas stations was a lot easier than getting on board with some of our corporate partners, and part of that was working around their internal structure.
The more local stores and the managers were more readily to just move their items and have us move their items wherever we thought would be the best location and the best fit for the project. The larger chains had within their structure basically, they had to check with their superiors and get back to us on whether that was feasible or not.
Things like planograms where the corporate office says, okay, this granola bar needs to be in this spot right next to this breakfast bar next to this item. The individual stores cannot move those items. And so we had to be creative in how we were going to identify those healthy options and make sure that they were still marked as a healthy choice, but they just weren't on a point of sale rack because they just didn't have the ability to move that. And so being open and able to move off of your game plan and make sure that you're working well with your partners is important.
Find the manager of the store who is going to be the contact person throughout this project. because the manager seemed to take a lot more responsibility than some of the individual employees of the store.
And so once we actually got the corporate on board with us, it was a smooth process, and they were quick to get us in and get the signage up and go through the process. But actually getting them to jump on board and sign on really took some time. And so that is something I would encourage, is just planning ahead for that time, and maybe starting with your corporate partners versus your local, because it's going to take you more time to get that moving.
It's been an easy process. It's something easy to maintain. Misty and I do a lot of correspondence over email with numbers, how much we're selling.
Working with the corporates, we've learned that they do a much better job of tracking their inventory. And so in addition to the number of items sold for each item, we're also getting the dollar amount sold for each item. And so we can really see, we might have sold 2 less, but the price went up by 50 cents from year to year. And so I think that's valuable data that we weren't really anticipating getting or asking for in the beginning, but now that we've got it, it makes a lot of sense to have that.
And it's just a program that needs to keep going, definitely, especially for, fast food options. There's so many kids and athletes and sports and stuff going on that fast food at a convenience store sometimes doesn't go in the right direction. So given just more options for people to see and call their attention to them that they don't think of just on a regular basis.
As we start kind of evaluating the data that we've been receiving from each location, we're really seeing some good trends. So one of our corporate locations that we looked at was the first one that we really started looking at their data. We saw that from the time we started the rack in their store to the end of the data that we had at that point, the worst month for items to increase, they increased by 50%. So they may had 21 items on their rack, 50% of those items increased in sales. So initial reports are very promising for this project, and we feel like we're on the right track. As we continue to evaluate that data, hopefully we'll continue to see that trend.